Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good. Every week, we explore how professionals and organizations can stay capable in an age where AI is changing almost everything about how we work, learn, and lead. Today, we're diving into one of the deepest leverage points in human performance, our beliefs. Not vague mindset cliches, but the specific, testable beliefs that quietly shape what we notice, how we feel, and what we actually do when it matters most. My guest today is Nir Eyal, recognized thought leader and New York Times bestselling author. He has spent his career studying where business, behavior, and the brain meet. The work has become three books, each chasing a different question about what we do and why we do it. His first two bestselling books, two of my favorites, called Indistractable and Hooked, and now he's the author of his latest New York Times bestseller, Beyond Belief. In this book, Nir lays out a science backed framework for how beliefs drive attention, anticipation, and agency, and how we can deliberately re engineer those beliefs to change our behavior, our health, our relationships, and even how we age. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm Charles Good. This show is built for leaders, managers, and high achievers who want to think better, grow faster, and perform under pressure. Each episode, I sit down with leading researchers, best-selling authors, and experts to uncover what actually works, the practical tools, proven strategies, and insights you can use when the pressure is real. Because in a world that keeps changing, the edge belongs to those who can outlearn what worked yesterday, outthink what's coming next, and outperform when it counts. Welcome to the program, Nir.
Thanks, Charles. Great to be with you.
So the first question I always like to ask my guests, just so our audience can learn more about them, is tell us more about your background and what got you interested in this work.
Sure. So let's see. So I started a couple companies. And after my last company was acquired, I had some time on my hands and I thought I was going to start another company, but I had this very strong conviction that habits were going to be a big deal. And this was back in 2012. Okay. So the Apple App Store was only about 4 years old. And I really believed that habits would matter, but I didn't see any book out there on how to build habit forming products. So I started blogging about it and researching. I spent a lot of time at Stanford, the Stanford Library, and talking to experts and going around Silicon Valley and asking lots of people at companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp and Slack and Snapchat how they do what they do. And so that became my first book, Hooked. I didn't end up starting another company. The book became my company because my readers kept asking me for, can we have this in book form? The blog turned into a book. That turned into a class that I later taught for several years at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, and then later the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design, the D School at Stanford. And then that was my first book. And then after a few years, I had another problem on my hands where I found that I was getting distracted, that technology was getting so good that I found that I was using it too much. So Hooked was about how to build good habits with the tech products we use. Indistractable, my second book, was about how do we break those bad habits, and in a tech positive way. I didn't want another book telling me, stop checking email, stop checking your phone, stop checking social media, because that advice is the only kind of advice that a tenured professor who can't get fired would give. Normal people, we need to use technology because we're going to get fired if we don't use these tools. So I wanted a tech positive approach based on solid research that delves into the deeper psychology of why we get distracted. And so that became my second book, Indistractable. And then my third book, the genesis, was some funny phone calls. You see, a few years ago, I do these office hours with folks. Anybody can call me. We talk for 15 minutes. I do it every single week. If you've read one of my books, you can ask me anything. And maybe, 1 out of 20 calls, not every call, but maybe 1 out of 20 would sound something like this. Somebody would call me and say, "Hey, Nir, I read Indistractable. I really enjoyed it, but the thing is, it didn't work for me." And I'd say, "Oh, it didn't work? Tell me more. Let's go step by step. I want to know where it didn't work for you. So let's start with step one. How did step one go?" I read step one. I read it. I really liked it. But you see, the thing is that it didn't work because I didn't do it. I'd say, "You didn't do it. Okay, all right, no problem. Maybe you skipped that step. Let's talk about step two. How did step two go for you?" Well, I read step two as well. I read that one. But you see, the thing is, I didn't so much do that one either. And I was kind of scratching my head here. Why was it that people would wait for months to tell the author of a book that they read that the thing that they didn't do didn't work? And I thought, is it me? Is it my readers? Did I write a bad book? What's going on here? And then I realized, actually, I have books on my bookshelf that I haven't read. I've listened to gurus and experts and YouTube videos and podcasts giving great advice and haven't put it into practice. Why is that? Right? Why is it that in an age where we have so much information, We don't do what we know we need to do. The problem isn't that we don't know what to do. The problem is that we keep getting in our own way. So I want to dive deeper. Why is that? What's going on? And it turns out that knowing what to do and why we should do it, wanting the benefits, that's not enough. That there's something missing. That motivation is not a straight line between behavior and benefit. That motivation requires to sustain motivation requires three things, not just behavior and benefit, but also the belief that we have to have that crucial element. For example, if I'm working for a boss and I want the benefits of working for that boss, but I don't believe in their leadership. Okay, I don't believe they're going to give me my raise or promotion, or I don't believe they're guiding the company in the right direction. Am I going to stay motivated to work for them for very long? No, I'm not going to follow that leader. Conversely, if I don't believe in my own ability to do a behavior, even if I know down to the T exactly what I'm supposed to do, if I don't believe in my ability to do it, right, that I'm not ready for this is too difficult, I might not follow through. What if it doesn't work out? If I don't believe I can do it, I'm also going to quit eventually. I'm also going to lose motivation. So that's when I discovered that really the linchpin here is that you not only need to know what to do, the behavior, not only do you need the benefit, but most importantly, to sustain motivation, you have to have the belief. That belief is a defining trait on whether people persist, and persistence is the defining trait of whether you will meet your long term goals. It's not intelligence, not some special information. It's whether or not you persist, because persistence doesn't guarantee success, but quitting guarantees failure. So if we know that beliefs are so important, I didn't find a book that really explained how do you harness the right beliefs, what we call liberating beliefs, and get rid of the limiting beliefs.
Love that. Thanks for unpacking that. That's the gap between the knowing and doing. It just doesn't get done. Well, let's start with the definition because you write that belief sits between fact and faith, a firmly held opinion open to revision based on new evidence. So unpack that for us. And in your view, what is a belief and what's not a belief?
Yeah, we use these words kind of interchangeably that beliefs mean facts, but they don't. They're different things. So a fact is an objective truth. It is something that is true whether or not you believe in it. So the world is more like a sphere than it is flat. Sorry, flat earthers, I hate to disappoint you, but the world doesn't care what you believe. A fact is a fact. You cannot change facts. On the other end of the spectrum, we have faith. Faith is a conviction that does not require evidence. God rewards the righteous. There's no amount of evidence that's going to change someone's mind on that, nor should it. It's a matter of faith. But between fact and faith is a belief. And beliefs are very special because, unlike faith, which people almost never change, unlike facts, which you cannot change, beliefs are malleable. So, the most important lesson that I learned writing this book was that beliefs are tools, not truths. Beliefs are tools, not truths. But most of us, we never question these beliefs. We adopt them from our upbringing, from our culture, from something a teacher said, from something that we have been repeating to ourselves our entire lives. And we never unpack these beliefs to ask us, is this belief serving me or is it hurting me? And so what the most important thing is not necessarily how to change those beliefs. We can talk about that. It's staying open to changing them. We take it very personally when someone disagrees with us. Even the way we say that, think about that. When someone disagrees with us, as if they're disagreeing with us, with the person, not the idea, right? When someone disagrees with you, it's hard, especially I feel like in American culture. It's not every culture, but certainly in American culture, it's kind of offensive when someone disagrees with you. Why? It's because we take it as an affront, as if you don't like me because you don't like my opinions, when really it's got nothing to do with each other. And so what we need to do is to have what's called intellectual humility, that the research reveals that we don't see reality clearly. None of us see reality clearly. And I can even prove it to you how distorted your vision is because of your beliefs. And so what we've uncovered are what we call these three powers of belief, that beliefs can change what you see, literally what you are able to see with your eyeballs, the opportunities right in front of you that two different people will see them differently. People who are afraid of heights see distances as further. People on a diet see food as larger. There's all these studies that show how your beliefs literally change what you can see with your eyeballs and your brain. You'll perceive reality differently. Beliefs also change what we are able to experience, what we feel. We call this the power of expectation. And so what we feel, not only our feelings, but our physiological state, how we experience pain and suffering. And finally, our beliefs of what we do, our sense of agency. And so those three powers, what we see, what we feel, and what we do, ultimately, this shapes who we become.
I love those, and we're going to get into those in more detail. And I like what you say that beliefs are really your working models or mental tools that we can navigate reality when the truth isn't fully knowable. So the real question isn't, is this belief objectively true, but does this belief still serve me? And is it open to being updated as reality pushes back? Which, like you said, it's many people, that's not the case.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And we see this time and time and time again where we don't question these limiting beliefs, especially when it comes to a leadership setting, whether it's with our employees, whether it's our the limiting beliefs that they might have or that we might have about them. And the tricky thing is that with these limiting beliefs, they're always hidden. It's almost like your face. That if I asked you, look at your face. How do you look at your face? Right. The only way you can look at your face is you have to reflect. You need a mirror, or you need to be on a Zoom call in order to see your own face. You can't see your own face. And yet we all have one. And isn't it amazing how we can see everyone else's? Have you noticed that? You can see your employees' limitations. You can see your colleagues. You can see your family members, your spouse, your kids. You can see all their limitations, but you can't see your own limiting beliefs. They're hidden to you because to you, they feel like facts. And so, how do we see our own face? How do we reflect? We need something outside of ourselves. And the same goes with our limiting beliefs. We need a process, we need steps in order to see our limitations, in order to act upon them, in order to turn those limiting beliefs into liberating ones.
Love that. And I love how it reframes it too in your book about motivation problems are really belief problems. And once you see it that way, behavior change becomes a belief engineering challenge. And you mentioned the three powers really to change your beliefs. Love to go into the first one with attention, the power to see what you believe. Because we've all heard that seeing is believing, but you flip that script and show that believing is seeing. It's just as true. So, talk to me more about that and how our beliefs filter reality. And what does that mean for things like performance reviews, conflict at home, or maybe leaders trying to read their teams more accurately?
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. They did a study where they gave two groups of people a very simple task. The task was look through this newspaper and count how many images you see. Just count one, two, three, four. How many images do you see in this newspaper? Now, the two groups were separated based on people who believed they were lucky or unlucky. It wasn't a fact. They didn't follow them around and observe whether they were lucky somehow. They just asked them, do you believe you're lucky or do you believe you're unlucky? Now, the people who believed they were unlucky to do this task took on average 2.5 minutes. Okay, 2.5 minutes to count the image in the newspaper. The lucky people took just 11 seconds. Okay, why this gap? Why this difference? Well, on page 2 of this newspaper, one of the images said in big bold letters, there are 43 images in this paper. Collect your reward. The lucky people saw that image, read it, processed it, got up from their chairs, collected the money, and were out the door 11 seconds later. The unlucky people took 2.5 minutes to count all those images, even though, here's the kicker, they counted correctly. We know they saw the image. They correctly put down 43 images in the newspaper, and they were wondering, hey, how come that guy's leaving the room so early? Because they never saw the ad. They never saw it. It was right there in front of them, literally under their nose, and they didn't see it. They couldn't see it because their brains wouldn't let them. It can't be that easy. Things like that don't happen to me, right? I'm an unlucky person. So because they didn't expect it, they couldn't see it. Their brains wouldn't let them. You see, one of the biggest misconceptions that we have is that we see things as they are. And that is not true. No one sees reality as it is because you can't. Right now, your brain is processing 11 million bits of information. 11 million bits. That is the equivalent of reading War and Peace every second twice. Okay, imagine 2,000 pages of text every single second. Tremendous amount of information. What is that information? It's the light entering your retinas, the sound of my voice entering your ears. It's the ambient temperature of the room. It's all these things that your brain is processing. But conscious awareness is only about 50 bits of information. 50 bits is one sentence per second. So War and Peace twice versus one sentence. That is the real world to you. That's what you call reality is not reality. It's a filtered perception of reality based on your beliefs because it's all your brain can handle. And so it's a wonderful illustration about how based on our beliefs, Our beliefs will filter what goes into conscious awareness, just like those people who believe they were unlucky. So their brain never filtered through, it never passed through conscious awareness. It always stayed in those 11 million bits. It never entered the conscious awareness, the 50 bits, even though it was right there in front of them.
I love that keyhole metaphor where we live life through a keyhole. Reality is vast, but what we actually experience is a very narrow cone of attention pre-selected by our beliefs. That's can be both probably scary and empowering for many people.
What you don't see reality as it is, you see what you pay attention to. And so if you are looking for good news, good things, you're going to see more good things. If you believe people are generally nice, that they're trustworthy, that they're friendly, guess what? You're going to see a lot of nice, trustworthy, friendly people. But if you believe people are bad and shouldn't be trusted, you're going to collect more and more stories and you're going to see more of that. It's almost like, if you ever had I don't know if you grew up having a dream car. Oh, I want a Mercedes or I want a BMW. And it's amazing. If you want that, all of a sudden you see it everywhere. It's called prevalence inflation. And in fact, we see this with all kinds of problems that don't exist. Crime has been falling consistently for the past 50 years across the country. And yet you ask the average American, they'll tell you crime is at record highs. No, it isn't. Because we're scared of it. And what we're scared of, what we fear, we pay attention to. What we pay attention to, we see more of.
So once we see how beliefs control what we notice, then we take the next step and ask, okay, so what about how we feel? And this is where anticipation comes in, the idea that our brains are prediction machines running what you call experience loops. I love this four-step experience loop, the believe, the anticipate, the feel, the confirm. Unpack that for us through that example that you give in the book about liquid death.
That's a good one. So Liquid Death is an incredible brand in that it's just water. It's water. And the purveyors, the founders will tell you it's just water. I mean, okay, it's bottled in Austria, but the only reason they bottle it there, it's actually just tap water. It's the only facility they could find that would put water in a can as opposed to a plastic bottle. And what's so amazing about Liquid Death is that even though everybody knows it's just water, people will tell you it tastes better, that it's more crisp, that it's more refreshing, that people will tattoo the Liquid Death logo on their arms because they're so infatuated with the brand, because they're in on this joke. They kind of know, the idea is that it's death to plastic. And the brand's doing very well. It's not a business case study to follow per se, but it's very interesting how our perception of a product will actually change how we experience it. Most people think that advertising is about increasing awareness. And I think it actually subtly plays a very important role. It actually incepts the enjoyment of the product. I'll give you a great example. One of my former colleagues, Baba Shiv at Stanford, he did this experiment where he took people and he asked them to lay down in an fMRI machine. An fMRI machine tracks blood flow in the brain. And he asked them, as their brains were being scanned, he asked them to sample wine. First bottle of wine, he said, this is a very cheap bottle of wine. It's only $5. I want you to tell me what you think of it. And people would say, it's a little harsh. I don't quite care for it. It's not really for me. Okay, no problem. They flush out their mouth. Now they have the second sample of wine, the next bottle. And they're told, this is a very expensive bottle of wine. It's, Chateau de something, something. What do you think? And they say, oh, wow, this wine is very delicious. It's, I can taste a bit of jamminess and, I can tell the earth tones. I don't know what wine snobs say. And it turns out, of course, the trick it was the same exact wine. Same exact wine. And what's fascinating is that not only do people say the more expensive wine tasted better, even though it was the same wine, we could actually see that in their brains, they experienced the more expensive wine is better because we saw the reward centers of their brain become more active. And so we can hypothesize that they weren't lying. They didn't just say they liked the wine more, even though it was the same wine. They actually enjoyed it more because they expected it to taste better. Why? Because we believe that things that are more expensive are of higher quality. And so their brains gave them exactly what they expected. And so we see this phenomenon repeated again and again and again. Did you know that if you give golfers a putter and tell them this putter was used by a famous golfer, Tiger Woods or something, they putt better. They actually putt better because they expect, and there's probably some kind of good biological reason. Maybe they feel more relaxed. Maybe they're more focused. We don't really know. But there's this placebo effect that occurs again and again and again in our expectation of our experiences. That becomes actually what we perceive. So when it comes to Liquid Death, It's no surprise that if you expect something special, you're going to experience something special.
That's great insight there. And you're right. That experience loop starts with belief because before you feel anything, your brain has already decided what you're likely to feel. And I love that anticipation phase where the body and the brain reconfigure in advance, adjusting your attention, your muscle tension, or even your physiology to prepare for what you expect. So, like you said, you actually see a difference, you feel a difference, you witness it biologically, not just in your mind, which changes our whole thinking about the placebo effect and whether or not it's effective or not. How do you know which ones you need to challenge and which ones you should just accept? Because you say you need to have selective skepticism, right? Because we can be manipulated by our expectations as well. So, when do you know when to question your beliefs and when to say, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy this and it's really serving my greater need?
So selective skepticism, I made up that term because I think we don't use placebos enough. And the reason we don't use placebos enough is that we used to think that placebos always involve deception. That in order to fool someone into taking a placebo, you had to do a double blind controlled study where the person taking the pill, the person administering the pill, nobody knows what's a placebo and what's the real drug. Well, a few years ago, there's a researcher by the name of Ted Kaptchuk at Harvard, and he wanted to test this hypothesis. So he calls in a bunch of people who have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and he tells them, "You see here, I have this pill jar. It says placebo on the bottle. Okay, this is a placebo. It is an inert substance." And here's what he told them: "It has been shown to help with the symptoms of IBS for some people," which is true. He tells them this, gives them a bottle of pills that says placebos, and tells them this is an inert substance. There's no drug, there's no medicine in this. And wouldn't you know it, it turns out to be as effective at the pain symptoms of IBS as the leading pain medication. As effective, the placebo. Even when people know it's a placebo. So much so that people had to come to him, people after the study came to him and said, "Dr. Captra, can I get some more of those placebo pills?" In fact, did you know that if you go on Amazon right now and you search for placebo pills, you will see pills marked as placebos for sale. And underneath, you will see 5-star reviews for fast acting relief. It's amazing. So why not? Right. So that's the selective skepticism. I used to kind of make fun of Chinese traditional medicine or herbal healing and this stuff. And now, I started to question that stuff, that if it doesn't have side effects and if it's not too expensive, why not? Right? So, okay, does vitamin C cure a cold? No, it doesn't. Right? That's a myth. But you know what? If it makes you feel better, if taking a pill walks you through those steps of curing the symptoms of what you're suffering with, why not? It can't, if it's not too expensive, there's no side effects. I think we should actually be taking more of them, knowing that they're so effective. Now, a warning here that placebos don't cure sickness. Okay, sickness is not illness. Those are two separate things. Sickness and illness are two separate things. Sickness is in the body. So placebos do not cure cancer. Placebos do not cure a broken arm. That placebos are not effective for sickness. Okay, a lot of people confuse that. However, they're very effective at curing illness because illness is in the mind. And 80% of our healthcare spending is on illness, not sickness. It's the symptoms of the sickness that we're spending all this money on. And so I'm an advocate for this selective skepticism. Another example in the things we buy, when people wear headphones that are very expensive or very cheap, the quality standards today, you can't tell a difference. If we don't tell you how much they cost, it's all, it's just chance which ones you like, which ones you don't like, because they're all pretty good. On the other hand, when I tell you which headphones are expensive, you will swear that those sound better. And so if you can afford it, you're buying your joy. You're buying the pleasure of the experience because you think it's better. And it's real. It really does feel better. It's just not because of anything in the product. It's because of everything in your head.
Well, we've covered how beliefs shape what we see and what we feel. The third power, the one I think is most important for capability and leadership, is agency, the power to do what we believe. And that's where beliefs move from inner experience to outward behavior. You write about Martin Seligman's work on learned helplessness, and then you flip that script to say helplessness is actually our default, and we have to learn hope. So, talk to me more about how beliefs control and shape our behavior, and what does the science say about building this hope circuit that you describe?
Yeah. So this idea of learned helplessness was as pretty close as we can get to gospel in the psychology community. Everybody believed in learned helplessness. And this idea is that, if you try and try again and things don't work out, you keep failing, well, eventually you learn hopelessness. And this explained all kinds of socioeconomic phenomenon, generational poverty that, people are kept down because they try and keep trying and that nothing they do matters. And so they give up. They learn helplessness. Well, the scientists who promoted this theory, Seligman and Meyer, being the good scientists that they are, you have to give them credit. Years, decades, I think it was about 50 years after these studies, maybe 40 years, they decided to look at the data again. And what they discovered blew everyone's mind. That not only is learned helplessness false, but that rather the data showed that the conclusion was 180 degrees from what they originally thought. That in fact, we don't learn helplessness, we learn hope. That helplessness is our default state. That if you think about it, why do we have limiting beliefs, right? Well, the definition of a limiting belief is a belief that reduces motivation and increases suffering. Well, why would the brain come installed with that, right? What would be the benefit? Well, because the brain's primary objective, more than anything, it's not to make you happy. It's not to help you meet your full potential. It's not to make you a good leader, make lots of money. The brain doesn't care about any of that. The primary objective of your brain is to keep you alive. And so what's most likely to keep you alive? Well, whatever you did yesterday, whatever you believed yesterday, got you here today, didn't it? And so the least risky thing your brain can get you to do is to keep doing and thinking and believing whatever it is you've always been doing and believing and thinking. Because that's what's going to be most likely to keep you alive tomorrow. Because good things are nice, but bad things can kill you. So your brain is hyper vigilant on anything that's risky, right? So at least, even if you're suffering, even if there's things you can change, the brain would rather keep you safe with less risk than to have you do something new that might hurt you. So we have these limiting beliefs, and we start from this state of helplessness because that's the most safe thing to do. It's the way we're born. When you think about a baby, a baby is completely helpless. It's totally dependent on its caregivers. There's nothing, very little a baby can do to protect itself. It has to be taken care of. And so what we have to learn over time is hope. We have to learn what we can do. We have to learn agency over time.
Well, and each time we successfully exert that control over a challenging situation, we strengthen the neural circuits that override passivity that you mentioned in the book and build that hope circuit. And even by a practical means of seeking mastery experiences, small, real wins just beyond our comfort zone, because your brain needs that evidence, not affirmations, to update that sense of control.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there's a wonderful anecdote with Serena Williams. Serena was competing in Wimbledon one year, and she was not doing well. She was having a very bad time of it. And the reason she wasn't doing well is that she was hesitating at the net. She wasn't rushing the net. And at that level of tennis, if you hesitate even a millisecond, you're going to lose the match. Her coach, Patrick Montaglou, calls her over and he says, Serena, look, I've been looking at the statistics. And did you know that 80% of the time that you rush the net, you score a point? 80% of the time you score a point. She says, what? I thought I was terrible at the net. And he says, hey, look, statistics don't lie. And he's right. Statistics don't lie. But he did. She was not scoring anywhere near 80% of the points at the net, not even close. But the amazing thing is that this lie became reality. That because he knew what she was capable of doing, he didn't make it up out of thin air, right? A belief is a conviction that is open to revision based on evidence. He had evidence of what she was capable of doing, but she was locking herself in this limiting belief. This is the job of leaders, to help people see what they are truly capable of doing. So when he unlocked her limiting belief, she actually did start scoring 80% of the points at the net, and she ends up taking Wimbledon that year. Are we supposed to just lie to ourselves? Are we supposed to gaslight ourselves? Are we supposed to be delusional here? Well, I would argue you're already lying to yourself. You're already delusional. I just explained how none of us sees reality clearly, and we're already lying to ourselves. We're just picking the wrong lie. Do you ever notice how you can't spell the word belief without a lie? That at the center of every belief is a lie. but we're just picking the wrong belief. We're picking the limiting belief, the limiting lie, as opposed to the liberating one, the belief that we can, as opposed to we can't.
Great insight. And I'd like to also get into you tie this into motivation and discomfort. And you talk about procrastination because we often tell ourselves that we're waiting for motivation. But what we're actually doing is avoiding anticipated discomfort. Talk to us more about that and how that reframe really helps you to get motivated to do something or to stop that procrastination tendency that we all have.
Right. So it's important to realize that procrastination is not a character flaw. You don't have a broken brain, right? There's probably nothing wrong with you. It's not a moral failing. It's just that you haven't learned to deal with discomfort in a healthy way because you haven't been taught, right? That's not something they teach in school. And so distraction is always a desire to escape discomfort. In fact, all human behavior is about a desire to escape discomfort. We used to think that behavior is about, motivation is about carrots and sticks, right? We've all heard that old metaphor, carrots and sticks. Well, it turns out neurologically, the carrot is the stick. The carrot is, it's not carrots and sticks. The carrot is the stick that even wanting, craving, desire, lusting for something is itself psychologically destabilizing. The fact that we want it means it hurts. There's that old song, Love Hurts. It's exactly right. The way the brain gets us to do things is by making us want something that causes us discomfort so that we go get it, so that we can feel good, not because it's the feeling good part, it's the wanting that motivates it. Once we feel good, it's done, right? We're not motivated anymore. We already got it. So what drives us is always a desire to escape discomfort, which must therefore mean when we talk about procrastination, time management is pain management. Money management is pain management. Weight management is pain management. It's all pain management. And this is one of the biggest revelations I had in writing this book is that the separation of pain and suffering, this is the key, right? This is the key. We are taught that feeling bad is bad. And if you want to see the defining trait of people who do incredible things in every field, whether it's business, the arts, sports, they have a different relationship with discomfort. They use discomfort not as something to escape, not as something that they can't handle, but they use it as rocket fuel. They have different beliefs about pain than the rest of us do. And the reason is because most of us, we come installed with this hardwiring that says, oh, feeling bad is bad. I'm not supposed to feel bad. Oh, that's terrible, right? That limits us. Whereas if you have a different belief around pain, that, for example, let's say if right now, Charles, you started having heart palpitations and started sweating and all of a sudden your muscles got tight and sore. Well, if that happened right now during this interview, we'd have to rush you to the hospital. That'd be terrible. But if you had the exact same physiological symptoms, the same thing happened to you, but you were in the gym, well, you'd be getting a good workout. So you see, it's not what happens to us. It's our interpretation. It's a story. It's the difference between I am in the gym versus I'm at home doing an interview. It's the context. It's the story. It's not the data. It's not the information. It's the perception of what's happening that turns it into suffering. So that's really the unlock, is separating pain from suffering. Just like sickness is not illness, we talked about that earlier, pain is not necessarily suffering, and it's mediated based on our beliefs.
Love that approach and that reframe. Very powerful. Also, like to get your thoughts on positive thinking because you're pretty critical of empty positive thinking and what you call the Santa Claus theory, waiting for experts or the universe to solve things for us. You advocate for something different, what you call mental contrasting. Can you explain why positive thinking alone backfires and how this other approach really engages all three powers of beliefs?
The problem with positive thinking, there's a few problems with it. And we hear it in different formats, right? Like every generation has a new word for it. Today we call it manifesting. All right. That you see that all over the internet. And it turns out that when you look at the studies around this kind of stuff, it's not so good. The data does not back this up. That positive thinking and manifesting, anything that's end goal oriented, turns out to backfire. It backfires for a few reasons. Number one, it trains you into a state of lack. That unless this good thing happens to me, I can't be happy. right? I have to have love in my life to stop suffering. I have to be in shape. I have to make money. I have to do these things. I'm going to manifest these things. I'm going to have the universe deliver this stuff. And until it does, I'm going to suffer. I'm not going to be happy. That's a belief. That's just a belief. And I would argue that's a belief that actually increases suffering, because the truth is, you don't have to suffer, right? You don't have to have those things in order to stop suffering. You can stop suffering now, because suffering doesn't happen out here. Suffering happens up here. It's perception. The second, even bigger problem is that it turns out that when we stay outcome oriented, when we only think about the ends, we actually become less likely to do the things that it would take to get those things. Why does this happen? Gabrielle Oettingen sat people down and she connected them to blood pressure monitors. And as she did this, she had them do a visioning exercise. Envision the future you want. I want money, so I'm going to envision my mansion. I want a beach body. I want love in my life. I want good grades on an exam. I want these things. And as they were visualizing the end outcomes, she noticed that their blood pressure fell. They became more relaxed. Their heart rate decreased. And in follow-ups, they actually became less likely to do the things that they had to do to go get those things. And the theory is that, once you put in your Uber Eats order into the universe and say, I want, then you expect the universe to just give you stuff as if there's some kind of cosmic slot machine. You say, well, the order's been put in. I'm just going to sit here and wait. And then when it doesn't happen, well, then there's some guru who's selling you another package because you didn't vibrate hard enough at the cosmic, frequency of the universe or whatnot. And that can be very troublesome. So where does this come from, and what's the right way to do this? There is, in fact, a right way to do it. It turns out that you look to athletes, actually. So athletes don't visualize. They do visualize, but they don't visualize the way people think. They don't visualize the end goals. They don't visualize the trophies and the medals and the championships. That is not what athletes visualize. That's a waste of time. Athletes will visualize what they will do physically and psychologically when something gets in their way. So Michael Phelps has a famous anecdote where he was in the Olympics and his goggles slipped off in the middle of a race. Most people would say, oh, well, that's the race. Too bad. Done. I quit. Well, he had rehearsed it in his mind so many times that when this happens, not if, but when this happens, here's what I'm going to do, physically as well as psychologically. That's the difference. That's called mental contrasting. Mental contrasting is when we contrast where we want to go with what will get in our way, what we will do more specifically, physically and psychologically. Okay. So, defense is coming at me. What am I going to do? I'm skiing down the mountain and I might slip. What's going to happen? So when it comes to our personal goals, we have to be prepared for the pain. How do we prepare for the pain? We have to see it differently. We have to expect that there will be difficulties. We have to welcome them. We have to embrace the fact that that pain will come invariably. Pain's going to happen, but we're not going to turn it into suffering. We have to have those liberating beliefs ready to go in our brains, locked and loaded, so that when the pain comes, it doesn't turn into suffering. It never becomes suffering because we have those liberating beliefs ready to go. That's mental contrasting. That's far, far more effective than just envisioning an out.
Before we wrap up, want to just talk quickly about the dark side of belief in the form of those nocebos, right? Those negative expectations that literally make us sicker or feel more stuck. So how can those labels be both helpful and harmful? And what's a more helpful way to relate to them? Instead of saying, I'm burnt out, I have ADHD, I'm traumatized, what else should the listener do?
Yeah, so there's a very interesting case study of a man by the name of Mr. A. And Mr. A had a very bad breakup with his girlfriend, and he decides that he's going to end it all. He's going to take his life. He's done. So he goes to his medicine cabinet, and he pulls out a bottle of antidepressants, and he takes the entire bottle. Now, just as he takes the last pill, he decides he's going to change his mind. He actually wants to live after all. He rushes to the neighbor's house. He tells them, take me to the hospital. They rush him there. And by the time he gets there, he collapses on the floor, and he gives the nurse the pill bottle, and he says, I took all my pills. Help me. Now, they rush him to the ER. They're trying to figure out what he's overdosed on, and they take his blood pressure, and they see it's dangerously low. His heart rate is falling, and he's falling in and out of consciousness. Now, they look at the pill bottle, and they try and figure out, okay, what drug here did he overdose on? But they look on the pill jar, and it doesn't say the name of the medication. It says a phone number. They call this mysterious phone number and they determine that Mr. A was in a clinical trial, that in fact, he hadn't taken any antidepressants. He had taken an entire bottle of placebos, that nothing in that jar could have possibly caused his physiological reaction. The low blood pressure, the falling heart rate, the consciousness, none of that could have come from the medicine. Now, they tell him this, and within 15 minutes, his heart rate normalizes, his blood pressure becomes stable again, and he walks out of the hospital completely fine, maybe a little embarrassed. Now, what does this teach us? This teaches us that our expectations, that our beliefs can cause true and profound physiological symptoms based on our labels, right? I am overdosing caused Mr. A to have the symptoms of an overdose. So what does this tell us? We have to be very careful of our labels. You see, our labels can become our limits. That when we label ourselves as something that, I have ADHD. And when I used to call myself somebody who has a chronic brain disease, every time I would get distracted by something, I would spiral into this anxiety loop of, oh, there goes my ADHD again. And what if I never get over this? And why don't other people have to deal with this? And I would focus all my attention on the ADHD as opposed to the thing I was trying to pay attention to. So the belief became reality. Now, how sure can I be truly that my distraction was caused 100% by my ADHD? Could I be 100% sure? Maybe 1% was caused by my reaction, by my beliefs, like Mr. A, right? If Mr. A, 100% of Mr. A's reaction was caused by his mind, he was not overdosing, and yet he created these symptoms. So can I be 100% sure that it's my ADHD? No. 99%? 70%? 50%? How much? I don't know. Well, that opened the possibility to another potential belief, because believing I have a chronic brain disease, or I'm a Sagittarius, or I'm not a morning person, or I'm too old for this becomes your limitation. So now I don't tell myself I have a chronic brain disease. I tell myself I'm learning a new skill. I'm learning a new skill. That's far more empowering than I have a chronic brain disease, which it turns out, the fact is, about 30% of adults with ADHD outgrow their symptoms. They learn their way around it. So I choose to believe that. Now, am I a medical doctor? No. Do I know for a fact that this is the case? No. But beliefs don't have to be true, because beliefs are tools, not truths. I know what motivates me. Hey, what's going to motivate me more? I have a chronic brain disease, or I'm learning a new skill. What increases or decreases my suffering? It's pretty clear. So I've adopted this belief that liberates me, and therefore it doesn't become my limitation, because without that, your labels can become your limits.
That's a great reframe because you're right. It's so much more empowering versus just making it part of your identity that you just passively accept and think you can do nothing about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is called identity foreclosure. That the most dangerous words in the English language are whatever comes after I am. If you believe I am what I am, that's true. You're done. You're never going to change. You're never going to grow, because that's it. You've already decided. You're foreclosed on your identity. And so we really want to avoid that. We really want to be careful.
As we close, love to give listeners a call to action. What should they start this week, perhaps today, of a starting protocol for building more useful, reality tested beliefs, maybe in one area of their life that would look like concrete steps to them?
Number one, identify where you're stuck. Okay, because remember, your limiting beliefs are always hidden to you. So you can't just say, tell me your limiting beliefs. You're not going to know. It's going to be hidden to you. You're going to think they're a fact. How do you find those limiting beliefs? You ask yourself, where are you stuck in some way? Where do you have some kind of suffering? Maybe it's a goal you've deferred, a New Year's resolution that keeps popping up. Maybe it's a relationship that needs repair. Maybe it's the fact that you don't like that you get road rage, or you check your phone too much and doom scroll. It doesn't matter. Where do you have some kind of suffering in your life? And what's the reason why? Okay, what's the reason? There's got to be a reason. What do you think is the reason? Then what we're going to do, there's a process to this, but essentially what you're going to ask yourself is, could the exact opposite of that reason also be true? Could the opposite be true? You would be amazed. You would be amazed how actually the exact opposite can also be true. And so if you've got these two beliefs that could be true, why not pick the one that serves you, the one that decreases suffering and increases your motivation? And then we can try them on. We could try on those new liberating beliefs. If they work for us, we keep them. If not, we can always find a new liberating belief. So the main thing I want to leave with everyone is that beliefs are tools, not truths. They can change.
Thank you so much, Nir. This has been a rich conversation. We looked at belief not as a vague mindset, but as a set of upgradable tools that quietly govern what we see, what we feel, and what we do. Remind our listeners how they get in contact with you, learn more about your work, and get your latest best-selling book.
Absolutely. So my website is nirandfar.com, and there you'll find a 5-minute belief change guide that's totally free. You don't have to buy anything. It's just a way to get you started. And my book is called Beyond Belief, and that's available wherever books are sold.
Thank you again, Nir. And thank all of you for listening. And to everyone listening, as you go back into your day, maybe pick one belief you're ready to question. Maybe it's at work, home, or in your self story, and run Nir's process on it, like he mentioned. Notice what you see differently, what you feel differently, and what you do differently when you treat beliefs as tools instead of the truth. Until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do differently and consistently that makes a difference. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. Remember, great ideas only matter when they change what you do next. So choose one insight from today's conversation and put it into practice this week. If this episode was valuable, follow the show and share it with someone who would benefit. And until next time, remember, the edge belongs to those who outlearned what worked yesterday, who can outthink what's coming next so that they can outperform when it counts.